He called it Artisanal Paranoia 5 minutes after a forklift nearly turned a floor tech into a chalk outline. I stood there, still holding the clipboard that had all but screamed that exact risk the day before, and watched him smirk like I'd asked him to wear a tutu. "Kill the register," he said, flicking his hand like he was swatting a mosquito. No acknowledgement. No, thanks for flagging it. Just that smug little flick and a condescending, "It's slowing down operations. We need agility, not anxiety." I stared at him. VP of Ops, zero experience in risk, but God forbid he missed a quarterly bonus because a blade guard needed recalibrating. The bastard actually laughed, said my clipboard was a prop. Told me to embrace modern risk culture, which apparently means trusting that duct tape and bravado can replace lockout tags and real protocols. I didn't argue. You don't argue with someone who thinks OSHA is a rumor and near death is just a morale booster. I just nodded, turned on my heel, and walked back to the control room with the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you've got a fuse already lit. Now, I'm not a hero. I'm a safety and risk manager who's seen more fingers reattached than birthday cakes in the last 5 years. I speak fluent forklift, sarcasm, and compliance clause 12.7c. My job isn't to win popularity contests. It's to make damn sure the people under that roof go home with the same number of limbs they clocked in with. And apparently, that made me a threat. I opened my folder, slid in a freshly printed one-page summary labeled Stop Work Triggers, Revision G, bolded and brutal. Top bullet. Guard defeat, PRAR's immediate lockout. Notify custodian. Then I scanned his kill it note, the one he hand-scribbled like he was canceling a gym membership instead of overriding life-critical controls, and BCC'd legal's archive box. Subject line, policy deviation, custodian signature not provided. It sat there in my sent folder like a landmine with a timer. That's the thing about paper. It doesn't yell. It doesn't stomp its feet. It just waits. You'd be amazed how many people listen to stories like this without ever subscribing. If you're one of the 97% just passing through, do us a favor. Hit subscribe and like the video. It takes a second, and it really keeps the wheels turning behind the scenes. Back on the floor, you could already feel it happening. First, a lockout tag got misplaced. Then someone started shortcutting the solvent swap logs. New barrel, no label, smells like nail polish remover and denial. The guard on Cutter 3 was pinned open with a zip tie just to get through the rush. And every time I flagged it, the VP scribbled noise or overreaction in the margins, like I was filing complaints about the weather and not imminent dismemberment. The irony? They kept asking me to sign off on changes, not because they valued my judgment, but because they needed my signature for the appearance of compliance. I refused, every time. I quoted the policy to their faces. No deviation in critical controls without custodian approval. They rolled their eyes, muttered about bureaucracy, and did it anyway. But I kept the receipts. Every blank spot on the training roster. Every badge scan showing the VP himself unlocking the panel after hours. Every maintenance ticket closed without verification. I didn't raise hell. I just documented the storm. Because I knew what was coming. And when the blade finally kissed bone, no one would be able to say they weren't warned. And that one-page sheet, it wasn't just a summary. It was a prophecy. It happened on a Tuesday, because of course it did. Tuesdays are where disasters go to pregame. I was doing a walkthrough near Cutter 3 when I saw it. Guard swung wide open, zip tie still hanging like a noose, spinning blade exposed and whining like it knew it wasn't supposed to be seen. And standing 3 feet from it, pale as printer paper, was Caleb. The new hire from last week couldn't even grow a mustache if he tried. Poor kid had both hands midair like he was stuck in a hostage video, too afraid to move, too green to know if this was normal or a goddamn guillotine. "Don't move," I barked, and crossed that floor faster than any of them had ever seen me. I hit the e-stop with the palm of my hand, hard enough to bruise, then turned and yanked the zip tie off like I was pulling teeth. Caleb looked at me like I'd just saved him from a bus crash. Maybe I had. "Who the hell disabled this guard?" I asked, loud enough for the whole line to hear. Someone mumbled something about needing to keep pace. Pace. That's the word they use right before someone loses a finger, and the VP calls it an unfortunate learning opportunity. I wrote the incident up, took photos, noted the name of the supervisor who'd walked past it 20 minutes earlier, dropped it in the VP's inbox with a bolded header, "Critical guard defeat, immediate investigation required." Next morning, my report came back from his office with a coffee ring and one word in red ink in the margin: noise. Noise, not hazard, not fix this. Just noise, like I'd been whining about the radio being too loud instead of watching a kid almost get shredded by a shortcut. I wanted to scream, but screaming gets dismissed as hysteria when you're the woman in the high-vis vest who doesn't laugh at "that time I almost lit myself on fire" stories in the break room. So instead, I opened my pocket notebook. Second page, top line, highlighted in yellow since the day I got the role. Changes to safety controls require custodian sign-off. Not optional. Not unless the VP is in a hurry. Required. Full stop. And yet, there it was. Another control bypassed, another report ignored, another near miss they'd treat like a joke until it stopped being funny. The worst part wasn't even the danger. It was knowing that my title, Custodian of Safety Controls, meant jack if they could bypass me and write noise over the wreckage. That policy clause was supposed to be my shield. But without enforcement, it was a sticky note on a dam. They didn't need my expertise. They needed my silence. And when they couldn't get that, they tried to bury it under cycle times, team spirit, and that nauseating word again, agility. But here's the thing about shortcuts. They breed in the dark. And I had already started flipping on the lights. This wasn't about a rookie freezing up anymore. It was about me realizing just how brittle the whole system was. One more cracked guard, one more skipped training, one more ignored warning, and that machine wouldn't just cut steel. It'd cut through someone's life. And maybe, just maybe, that'd finally be loud enough for them to hear. I stopped pretending they'd listen. That was the last illusion to go. You don't beg a flood to respect sandbags. You reinforce the dam and record the timestamp for when it cracks. So I spent that Friday night in my office with the door locked, lights dimmed, the hum of the old HVAC masking the click of keys, the full risk register, 12 years of entries, inspections, deviations, near misses, corrected hazards, and 2 actual fatalities no one likes to talk about, got compressed, date stamped, encrypted, and copied off the network onto a secure drive I slid into a bank deposit envelope. Then I archived it. Not deleted, not edited. Archived. It's amazing how many executives think deleting a spreadsheet makes a hazard go away, like danger runs on Microsoft Office and can't survive outside Excel. Next, I printed the one-pager again, but this time in bold, 14-point type, double-spaced. No jargon, no acronyms, just cold, brutal triggers. Padlock required if guard defeat detected. Immediate shutdown for untrained personnel on live lines. Notify custodian prior to control bypass. No wiggle room, no excuses. I emailed it to legal records with the subject line, VP override attached, custodian refusal logged. Attached his handwritten "kill it" note, circled it like it was a specimen in a biology class. I included the new one-pager and, crucially, stated at the bottom in plain language, I do not approve this deletion and have not signed any authorization to remove critical safety infrastructure. Paper doesn't shout. It doesn't get defensive. It just sits there, waiting to be undeniable. I tucked that hard copy into my clipboard, slid a backup into the glove box of my car, and uploaded one more to a private folder with insurer access, just in case someone got clever later. The next morning, I made my rounds like usual, clipboard in hand, face unreadable, passed by Cutter 3 again, guard back in place now, but no lockout tag. Someone had wiped their fingerprints off it, but not their guilt. I took time-stamped photos, close-ups of the scuff marks on the bracket, the zip tie still hanging from the trash can nearby, the wear lines that said, "We've done this before." Then came the training roster. I pulled the latest one from the wall in the break room, 4 new names all with blank cells under cutting equipment clearance. And guess whose signature was at the bottom, certifying they were fully trained? Mr. Artisanal Paranoia himself, signed and dated. No initials, no proof. Maintenance log? Found one for a solvent swap, closed with no secondary check, no technician name, no lot number listed. Just a green stamp that looked suspiciously copy-pasted. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't make a speech. I collected it all, documented it in my quiet little way, and logged every shred into my private folder under a name I knew they'd never click. Performance Review Prep 2023. Because here's the truth. I couldn't stop the train. That thing was moving too fast, powered by hubris, ego, and quarterly KPIs dressed up as urgency. But I could damn well lay the track that led to the brake handle. I could build a chain of custody so airtight that when it finally blew, and it would blow, every piece would snap right back to the hand that lit the match. And when that happened, no one would ask me why I didn't stop it. They'd ask how I knew. The smell hit me before I even reached the mixing station. Sharp, synthetic, sweet enough to trigger a headache behind my right eye. One of the operators looked up and half joked, "Smells like my wife's nail salon in here." The others laughed, but no one could tell me what solvent they'd actually swapped in. No change control request. No hazard re-eval. No SDS sheet in the binder. Just a beat-up barrel labeled with a Sharpie and duct tape confidence. I didn't yell. I wrote it down. Barrel ID, timestamp, operator name, and the fact that they all said, "It came in yesterday, I guess." No one wanted to admit who rolled it off the dock or who signed for it, which meant someone upstairs had pushed it through without telling me. Again. By the time I walked back through the bottleneck zone, the guard on Cutter 2 was fully removed, panel hanging open like a pulled rib cage and a broom propped up in place of the sensor block. And the machine was still running. No interlock, no slowdown, no tag. The night shift lead waved like it was no big deal. "Just trying to hit quota," he said. "We'll button it back up after this batch." After this batch. Always after. Never before. And where was the VP through all this? Smiling in the cafeteria the next morning, mug in hand, bragging about how production was up 17% since we streamlined safety clutter. He actually said that. Safety clutter. Like the only thing keeping someone's arm out of a rotating blade was a minor inconvenience. I clenched my jaw so tight I thought I'd crack a molar. Didn't say a word. Just nodded like I agreed and went back to my office. That's where I pulled the access logs. They say data doesn't lie, but it sure as hell tattles. There it was. 2:12 a.m. 2 nights earlier, badge ID ending in 1139, his. Unlocked the enclosure on Cutter 2 5 minutes after a zone bypass error triggered. Then nothing logged until sunrise. No maintenance ticket. No override request, no authorization. Just a VP playing weekend engineer behind everyone's back. Probably thought he was saving the line. What he really did was make himself legally radioactive. And still, I waited. Because some lessons, they don't learn from words. They only learn from impact. And that came 2 days later. The clipboard guy at the gate didn't look like much. Slacks too short, tablet in hand, that quiet little badge that means federal authority with the power to ruin your week. Said he was doing a routine audit on volatile material handling, random selection, nothing personal. I smiled like it wasn't Christmas morning. He made it 3 steps into the floor before the scent hit him, raised one eyebrow, walked straight to the mixing station, and tapped his screen twice. "This solvent listed on your approved inventory?" I didn't answer. I just handed him the blank SDS page with unknown substitute scribbled in the margin. His nostrils flared slightly. He asked for the lockout procedures. Then he asked who approved the solvent change. Silence. Then his eyes drifted to the open guard panel on Cutter 2. No tag, no lock. He didn't say a word. Just reached into his vest, pulled out a red OSHA padlock, and clicked it into place with the finality of a coffin lid. Line down. Silence. That sound? That was my brake handle. And the sound that followed? Footsteps, scrambling, shouting, panicked whispers from upstairs. Because someone finally realized this wasn't just a routine visit, it was the reckoning I'd been building one signature at a time. The moment the inspector touched that cutter, time split clean down the middle. Before, sarcasm, warnings, reports marked noise. After, the metallic click of a red OSHA padlock snapping shut, sealing a multi-million-dollar production line like a crime scene. He didn't even look around. No dramatic speech, no finger pointing, just one look at the defeated guard, one glance at my silent face, and then the lock, like it had always been waiting. The line stuttered, then went still. You could feel the pulse of the factory cut off, like a heart monitor gone flat. Somewhere, alarms were blinking, not the loud ones, but the subtle ones, the ones that live in spreadsheets and profit forecasts. Not 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Finance, 2.8 samad a day burn. Is that real? I stared at the screen, tapped back 3 letters. Yes. Then nothing. Just that one word suspended in digital silence while the rest of the plant scrambled like ants around a crushed hill. Upstairs, they herded into Conference B like chickens sensing a storm. I followed, clipboard in hand, boots still dusty from the floor, no makeup, no apologies. I walked straight to the table and placed my one-pager in the center like a playing card in a rigged game. The top line was in bold. Padlock risk. If guard is defeated, immediate stop. There it was, the prophecy, written, distributed, ignored. The CEO picked it up like it might burn his fingers, held it between 2 fingers, stared at it like it had betrayed him. Who signed off on this? He asked, voice calm but brittle. I met his eyes. No one, because I refused. Another silence. The VP fidgeted in his chair, trying to look engaged while quietly evaporating. I watched him. He didn't say a word, not yet, but his guilt moved in waves across his face. I could already see him reaching for the nearest excuse, like a man realizing the parachute wasn't packed. I waited. The inspector stepped into the room, uninvited, and took a chair without asking. That told them more than any memo ever could. We have a willful violation, he said evenly. Unauthorized solvent substitution, absent SDS, guard intentionally bypassed. Training records incomplete. He let the list hang. And, he added without looking at the VP, override occurred after hours. Badge logs confirm. I didn't need to twist the knife. He was already bleeding. What no one said, because everyone already knew, was that this wasn't a compliance failure. This was survival, and not just for the workers down there dodging exposed blades and untested chemicals, for the company itself. One more infraction at this level, and we'd be facing federal citations that make investor calls feel like eulogies. The CEO leaned back like gravity had doubled, the kind of lean where the next thing down is either your pride or your career. I stood there, hands behind my back, calm as a coroner. This wasn't about winning. It was about being right too late. The only thing more painful than watching disaster unfold is knowing you warned them, and knowing they thought your warning was a joke. They weren't laughing now. And neither was I. He cracked first. Of course he did. 30 minutes into the boardroom, being oxygen-starved by tension, the VP finally stood up like a man about to give a toast at his own funeral. Sweating through his tailored shirt, he gestured vaguely in my direction with both hands, like I was the magician behind the curtain of disaster. She buried us in forms, he said, voice climbing just a bit too high. We couldn't move. Every time we tried to implement changes, it was another checklist, another procedure, another goddamn signature request. She turned safety into a bottleneck. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Instead, I reached into my folder, pulled out a stack exactly half an inch thick, and slid it across the table like a dealer dropping a straight flush. Sequence, I said. Not volume, sequence. On top, his handwritten "kill it" note. Red ink, date, his initials. Paper doesn't lie, it doesn't shout. It just waits for the right moment to surface. Under that, the access log showing his badge unlocked the Cutter 2 enclosure at 2:12 a.m., timestamped down to the second. Beneath that, the training sheet for the last cycle, 4 empty cells next to new hires' names, all certified as complete in his handwriting. No initials from supervisors, no logs from the training kiosk, just a signature over silence. The inspector didn't look at me. He didn't have to. His attention stayed squarely on the VP like a searchlight locking onto a rat in the dark. Who is the named custodian of safety control protocols? The inspector asked. I stepped forward, calmly, and set a printed policy binder onto the table. Flipped to page 7, highlighted in yellow. No deviation, modification, or bypass of critical control systems shall occur without written sign-off from the custodian of safety systems. Then I raised my hand. My name is on that line, I said. He nodded once, a quiet recognition that the map of responsibility was now crystal clear. The VP tried to pivot. We were under pressure. Production had to meet targets, and the inspector cut him off. This isn't about pressure, this is about process, and your process appears to include forging compliance and overriding life safety systems. His voice didn't rise, but it landed like a mallet. He glanced at the binder. This falls under willful violation. That means maximum penalties, potential press involvement, possibly civil liability depending on the worker testimonies. The room went still. The CFO closed her laptop slowly, as if trying to vanish into the screen. Legal flipped a notepad shut without taking another note. The CEO pressed his fingers together and stared down the table like he'd just watched his retirement burst into flames. No one defended the VP. He'd overplayed. Thought his title would shield him, thought I'd roll over, thought paper trails only mattered if you bothered to read them. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need to speak anymore. The documents were doing all the talking now, and they had perfect memory. The board didn't even wait for lunch. Emergency call, no warning, just a message that said, "Upstairs, now." When I walked in, they looked like a poker table full of men holding busted hands and realizing I'd been the dealer the whole damn game. The CEO gestured to the empty seat at the end like he suddenly remembered I existed. "We need to get that line back online," he said. No bluster left, just raw, dented urgency. I sat, placed my folder on the table, and opened it like I was unwrapping a manual to their own survival. "You want the padlock off?" I asked, calm and precise. "There are 3 steps, 2 signatures, no shortcuts." I didn't rush, didn't smirk, just let the words land. "First," I said, "we restore the full risk register, original format, no edits, full read-only access for compliance, audit, and insurer review. Second, custodial authority comes back, formally. That means I sign every critical control change. No signature, no change." I paused, waited to see who would twitch. No one did. "Third, budget line for the corrective action. Not a proposal, not a pitch, a hard number. You pull guards again, you retrain, you swap chemicals, you follow protocol. No paperwork, no product." They listened. Not like before. This time it was different. There was a weight in the room now, and it wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. Dead weight from choices they made and risks they hoped would stay hidden. "And?" the CFO asked, eyes narrowed, like she already knew I wasn't done. "And," I said, tapping my folder, "I want it in writing that the custodian, me, is not subject to HR termination or demotion decisions without full board review. During audits or within 90 days after any critical stop, my authority is insulated. That means no retaliation, no restructuring, no quiet exits." Someone exhaled through their nose. It sounded like surrender. Then I pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward them. One email, time-stamped 9:04 a.m. subject. RE Policy Review, Custodial Authority Requirement. From our insurer. I read it aloud. "Coverage of production interruption and liability limited unless critical systems are under active management by a named, authorized custodian and a documented current risk register exists." I lowered the phone. Let the sentence hang. That's when it hit them. This wasn't just internal damage control. This was insurance. This was investor confidence. This was survival, written in premiums and policy language. I didn't ask for trust. I didn't need it. What I offered wasn't a favor. It was the map out of their own recklessness. They didn't nod. They didn't argue. They just started writing. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that happens right after you stop bleeding and realize you're not dead, but someone else is going to pay the bill. The first signature was mine. Not a surrender. An agreement with teeth. I pressed my pen to the dotted line, blue ink only, right under the board's new policy title. Custodial Independence and Non-Interference Protocol. Direct board access, full veto authority over stop work conditions, and a separate reporting line insulated from HR's sudden whims. No more back-channel terminations, no more power games, just process, policy, and ink. Then came theirs. Each board member, one by one, no eye contact, no small talk. The CEO didn't hesitate. His signature looked tired. The CFO added a second clause herself. Mandatory recertification for all senior managers, starting with those responsible for recent events. We all knew what that meant. The VP wasn't there. He'd been reassigned to a newly minted role with no budget, no reports, and a suspiciously long-sounding title that read like a padded cell in corporate speak. Strategic Expansion Liaison, or some other euphemism for exile. They didn't fire him. They vacuum sealed him somewhere far from anything sharp or flammable. I didn't celebrate. I went to work. Toolbox talks, every shift, every crew. I stood shoulder to shoulder with techs who had every right to hate my guts for slowing down their quotas. I didn't care. I walked the line, reinstalled every guard, logged every bolt, tagged every bypass with a fresh, color-coded system I designed myself. Green for good, yellow for review. Red for touch this, and I shut you down. And the inspector watched. He didn't say much, just hovered, clipboard in hand, nodding occasionally like he was checking off a list only he could see. At one point, he asked a junior operator what fail-safe interlock meant. The kid answered right. The inspector nodded again. That was a win. In my binder, I slipped in the final page, an addendum clause stamped and signed by legal, compliance, and insurance. Plain language, no room for interpretation. No termination or demotion of custodian during any ongoing audit or within 90 days following a critical stop may occur without documented insurer concurrence and board majority approval. They tried to gut me from the system. I became part of the system instead. It wasn't respect. Not yet. But it was structure. Accountability. Chain of custody with my name etched into every link. And for the first time in a long time, people started asking before assuming, requesting instead of shortcutting. I wasn't a roadblock anymore. I was a checkpoint. And still, the padlock stayed on. One last signature. One final line to cross before the machines could hum again. The paper was ready. So was I. The boardroom was silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scrape of the CEO's thumb running along the edge of my one-pager. He held it like it was radioactive. 2 fingers, barely touching the corners as if it might explode from the weight of being right too early. His eyes moved down the bolded top line again. Padlock risk if guard is defeated. Immediate stop. Then he laughed once. No humor, no air, just that flat, broken sound people make when they realize they've been driving with their high beams off toward a cliff. His eyes flicked to the seat across the table, empty now, the nameplate for the VP still there. No one had bothered to remove it yet. Maybe no one wanted to touch it. He called it clutter, the CEO muttered, said it slowed things down. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The line was still down. The inspector still waiting. The workers still standing by, and finance still bleeding $2.8 million every 24 hours of silence. I pulled out the final form, set it on the table, and uncapped my pen. Restart authorization, custodian signature required. I signed it slowly, deliberately, like turning a key in a lock I forged myself. Across the hall, through the window, we saw the inspector walk to Cutter 2. He knelt, confirmed the guard was back, sensors calibrated, tag visible. Then, with a nod toward the nearest camera, he pulled out a small key, turned the red OSHA padlock, and removed it with a click that sounded more like a gavel than metal. The line jolted. Then it hummed. Not like before. Faster, louder, reckless. No, this was different. It moved slow, steady, disciplined, like a thing that had seen death and chosen to walk differently. I gathered my papers. Didn't linger. But before I left, I pulled something from my bag, a small plastic frame, and walked it over to the mini fridge in my office. Inside it, the VP's original "Kill It" memo. Crinkled, coffee-stained, still carrying that casual malice written in Sharpie like he was canceling brunch. I pinned it under a magnet labeled "Almost." Then I locked the drawer. Later that afternoon, I finalized 2 retainer contracts, one with our insurer, one with our 2 largest suppliers. Quiet arrangements. Simple clause. All exported units must comply with embedded custodial standards and audit framework as designed by C. Warren. No fanfare, no press release, just quiet compliance that now traveled with every bolt and bracket we shipped. My standards